In Kyiv today, we are joined by the Canadian ambassador to Ukraine, Mr. Roman Washchuk. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Washchuk.
You're very welcome.
I'd like to start by asking you about Crimea and the issue at hand. Canada has recently renewed sanctions against Russia and has banned the import of goods from and into Crimea. Now, do you think that Ukraine will at some point get Crimea back?
I think Canada's position is whether it takes 5 months or 50 years, we are not going to recognize the annexation of Crimea, and we are going to support Ukraine in its right to assert its territorial integrity and control over its territory. I would remind you that Canada maintained a non-recognition policy about the annexation of the Baltic states by the Soviet Union from 1940 to 1991. And they are full-fledged members of the UN and NATO and the EU right now. So, sometimes short-term results aren't in the bag, but Canada is in this for everything from the short term, which we hope for, to the long term, which we're determined to tough out if necessary.
Apart from Canada supporting Ukraine financially, Canada has also been sending military experts to help train Ukrainian army. Do you think that since the first kind of experts were sent to Ukraine in the beginning of the conflict, do you think, and they've said that, and afterwards they said that the state of Ukraine's army is quite bad, and it's underfunded, and in fact it lacks a lot of the things that any regular army would have. But since that time, do you think, or do you know of, or has there been actual reports of the Ukrainian army improving?
The fact that the pseudo-republics, the Donetsk and Luhansk puppet republics, have been stuck at the same line now for months and months, shows that the Ukrainian armed forces have developed a much stronger capacity to engage and resist. The last major attempt at a localized assault, beginning of June, was fought back. The sort of Russian-led separatist forces suffered major losses. So I think we're seeing the Ukrainian armed forces, it's never an easy organizational task, getting their act together and being able to protect the sovereignty of their country.
Canada has been using the social media to try and dismantle some of those Russian myths that are out there about the war in Ukraine. Now, Canada understands that this is quite important right now for Ukraine to have a balanced view of what's going on here. But at the same time, it's been said that the West has been losing this massive social media campaign that Russia has invested in. Do you think this is true?
Assigning too much importance to the quantity, not quality aspect of Russian-generated internet trolls shouldn't be the way we measure how effective one country or another is in information terms. If you look at, let's say, opinion in Europe, which has been the area where people have been trying to sway views, because frankly, I think in Canada we have a very broad consensus that supports the Ukrainian narrative in this conflict. But in a country like Germany, the support levels for the Russian position have been consistently going down. Despite the efforts of all these trolls, whether they're posting their bogus tweets or Facebook posts in English or German or anything else. So I think in part we've been mesmerized by the sheer volume, but I'm not sure whether quantity translates into quality.
Canada has recently called on Russia to release Ukrainian fighter pilot and member of parliament Nadiya Savchenko. Now, for some, she's a symbol of resistance to Russia, while to others, she's she's being seen or portrayed as a pawn in a bigger geopolitical scheme of things. Do you think this is true? And do you think Ukraine at some point will get Savchenko back? She
is a symbol of capable, confident, and assertive Ukrainian womanhood. She has been an articulate spokeswoman for herself and for her vision of Ukraine as a state from behind bars. What the Putin regime's game plan is in terms of the frankly somewhat dubious trial they're running, we can't be sure. But what we do know is that she has a very clear vision of who she is and where she wants Ukraine to be, and that both the people of Ukraine and Canada as a partner are clearly supportive of her.
What can Ukraine learn from Canada's bilingualism, from Canada having two national languages, the French and English? Having grown up in Canada, I know that even if you don't know French, you're always aware of the French part of the national identity. So everybody understands that this is another part of Canada. So do you think this will be helpful for Ukraine to have two maybe national languages?
I think you can't copy-paste experiences from one country to another. Thing that one colleague here, a diplomatic colleague, mentioned to me, said, it's peculiar. He said, in Ukraine, almost every person is bilingual. So I think about over 90% of Ukrainians can operate in either Ukrainian or Russian. But the country is officially not. On the other hand, in Canada, the country is officially bilingual, but many Canadians don't know both languages. But they certainly are aware of them. I think the interesting thing about Canada as well is that we have language policies at both the federal level, where of course you have official bilingualism, and the principle is that a person should be able to get service in the language of his or her choice. I think Ukraine needs to pick and choose from the menu of international options out there.
Canada is home to more than 1 million Canadians which are of Ukrainian descent. Now, this can be used as an argument to say that, oh, this is why Canada's been providing so much support for Ukraine. But do you think that this is not so? This is not what's going on here, that there's more at stake here?
Supporting Ukraine is part of a principled Canadian foreign policy. It is about international law and about international rules. They have been, first of all, thoroughly violated with the annexation of Crimea, unprecedented since World War II in Europe. And now with a sort of creeping, undeclared invasion and aggression against the country. Canada has been a NATO member since day one. We co-wrote the Washington Charter. We have invested for, in fact, a century, since World War I, in Euro-Atlantic security. So supporting Ukraine is part of a global view and then acting on the Euro-Atlantic security aspects of that global security view. Naturally, I think there's a broad societal affinity for Ukraine because of the 125 years of Ukrainian presence in Canada. It means that pretty much everyone in Canada has bumped into someone or something Ukrainian, has been to Vegreville, seen the Pisamka, right, or been to a church basement and enjoyed a vareniki dinner. And it means that I often hear this from Ukrainian delegations, that the one thing they find the greatest relief in Canada is not having to explain to anyone where Ukraine is or what a Ukrainian is.
And on that note, we'll have to end our interview. Mr. Washuk, thank you for having me here and for agreeing to the interview.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for watching. This has been Tamara Rosevan for Ukraine Today in Kyiv.